take your car right then. I'll get you in a minute.
And they were happy because they were insured, but I'm like, you need to have a valid license.
Yeah, if you're driving without a license, and if it's suspended, they frequently will take the car. Particularly because if they pull you over on the freeway, you know, they need to get the car off the freeway. If they pull you over in front of your house, they may not impound it. If it's in a safe area where you can lock it up and have someone come pick it up, they may not take it, but they can. I think they have 30, they can impound it for 30 days. Same with the DUI, they can impound your car. You know, and that again goes to your demeanor. If you're like being belligerent with them over your DUI, they very well could have had you call your mom to come pick up your car, but since you're being belligerent, they're like, well, all right, let's call the tow truck and let's take your car. You know, because they can do that. So again, it goes to your interactions. If you're you know, being not too confrontational with them, then they may permit you to do something like that if you ask them nicely. In terms of minor things, again, you know, you're not going to do a check, you know, light check on your car every day, but it's good to check those things periodically. Check to make sure your lights, your front lights, your rear lights, your brake lights, your license plate light, all of those are working order. No large cracks in your windshield. Probably you don't want dice or anything in your front window hanging off your rear view mirror. Even there was a case. Even the little air freshener tree, that can be considered to be obstructing your view, and they can pull you over just for that. Now, there was a case that said that based on evidence that... What?
A lot of people have chains and stuff like that hanging from their...
They could. I haven't seen chains particularly, but if they're real thick, and they could. I could see that. There was a case where someone had that air freshener and they did a motion to suppress, which means they challenged the stop in court. And they apparently had money because they hired like an engineer to come in and discuss the size of the window versus the size of the tree and the optical view, and you know, talk about the ratio of the tree versus the size of the window. But most of us can't do that, and so if you can't do that to explain, because the cop's going to come in and say, well, it was obstructing the view. Now, unless you can get the engineer to go in there and take a picture and show that it wasn't obstructing the view, you know, you're not probably gonna win that suppression hearing. So you need to. I just generally advise people not to have any of that stuff in their car or on there because, you know, it's a headache, and you might as well, you know, it's better to avoid getting pulled over for something like that than to try to fix it after you got pulled over and arrested for something that you shouldn't have been pulled over for in the first place. And yeah, so the music, yeah, you just keep music at a reasonable level. Trying to think of what other minor things they can pull you over for.
Well, the headphones.
Headphones is one, but now even, I mean, like my thing for my phone has two, but I usually leave one out so that
I got pulled over actually right here on campus by the campus police.
Or having two?
Yeah, and I was actually changing, but I was coming to work and, you know, doing other stuff, and so the campus police pulled me over for having two in my ear, and there should be one. And, you know, I mean, I didn't have any music on or anything, and I had been switched over, and so you have to be real careful about that. You know, I got out of it that time, but, you know, they gave me a lecture out of late class and stuff, so.
Oh, another one is seatbelt. A lot of people get pulled over for no seatbelt. Tinted windows is one. front windows are not supposed to be tinted. The front, driver and passenger side windows are not supposed to be tinted. The rear windows can be tinted. Passenger windows, all the lights. Yeah, and then moving violations. Those are the big ones, moving violations as well. Know your rules, know the law on when you're supposed to signal, when you're not, where you can and cannot make U-turns, all those kinds of things. Those are very important. There's got gentleman in the back. You got a question?
No, it was on when you were speaking on the about like using the police on your car.
Yeah.
Now it was a time that my license had expired only like 3 months. And
Yeah.
they still told the car it was just because the cop didn't like me.
Yeah.
But it was expired, right?
Yeah, it was though. But I mean, to tow the car don't cost me ain't nothing like that. Just because it was expired 3 months ago. I don't know. I mean, that's reasonable.
No,
I don't take it personal at all. I can't get it.
which is the reason why I asked Attorney Johnson to be here, is because we have so many minor things, and Dr. Tucker and I hear the student stories all the time, that we have these little things that end up being very big things. And so it's a lot cheaper to get your license renewed if you're eligible for $20 on time and don't pay a penalty than it is to go through what, you said $800?
Yeah, you know,
Get it
I ain't paid $800 in my lifetime. Yeah.
Well, that's a good point. One of the key things, if you have a license, you need to make sure that DMV has your current address, because I know a lot of people move fairly frequently, and if that's the case, you need to make sure that you have either a P.O. box or a family address that you can have as your mailing address, so that when they send you something, you actually get it. Because if you move and they send it there, you're probably not going to get it. And the other thing is, with your license, remember, the license expires on your birthday. So, once you get into that habit, you can remember that it's on your birthday. Once you start getting close, and I don't know what year my license expires, but when I get, within about 3 or 4 months of my birthday, I always look at my license to see what year it expires, so I know whether I'm getting close. And because I don't move too much, but I use P.O. boxes, and when I change jobs, sometimes I change my P.O. box because I like it near where I work usually. And I've had the experience of I change my P.O. box and they don't get the change of address, or they're not processing or whatever, so I don't get those renewal things. That happened with my car recently. I didn't get my renewal for my car registration. That's another one, car registration. The license registration on your car, a lot of people get pulled over for those, or they get pulled over for having, they'll have the little red tag in their window or whatever. Related to the tinting, if you have a tinted window, probably don't want to put it in the back window, because they're not going to be able to see it very well. So you can put it in the back or the front window. Sometimes I see it on the license plate. I don't know if that's technically authorized, but it probably doesn't hurt because they can see it there, and they don't have any reason to pull you over. Because if they can't see it and they pull you over, then if you put it in the front, I don't like people putting it in the front, because they'll pull you over because they're behind you, and they can't see the little red card in your window. They'll pull you over, and then once they pull you over, then they smell the alcohol in your breath, or smell the pot in the car, or whatever, and then, it all goes downhill from there. So generally make sure it's visible, and I like to say making sure it's visible from the rear, so that they don't have any excuse to pull you over at that point if it's just the registration. You have that car sitting there.
And we need you to speak up there.
Okay, if the felon has been out of jail for 7 years, 5 years, employment, is there a hard something doing to expunge record?
Okay. So I guess we'll move on to the clearing your records section. And if you guys have any additional questions about stops or interacting with police, I will be here for a little bit after this is over, and I'll be happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability. With respect to what's your second question?
And then the second question is, if there's an adult, it has to be known at the beginning, like the picture talked about juvenile and ADHD, that may have gotten in trouble while they were juvenile because of that. Now, if that person is on probation now as an adult, is this still a way that their record for juvenile can be expunged somehow?
Okay, so the questions relate to expunging one's record, and the first one was having been a felon out of custody for the last 7 years, or it was 7 years ago that the crime was committed, or
Out of custody.
conviction?
Yeah, the crime occurred 7 years ago, it was clean.
No new convictions since then. It depends. There's a couple different. Expungement is a bit of a misnomer, unfortunately. The statute used to say expungement. 2 years ago, they took off expungement because it wasn't really an expungement. It was dismissal. So dismissal after conviction. So that you could technically say that you didn't have a conviction anymore, pursuant to the 1203.4 is the statute. And I have some forms about the various types of expungement. There are different things. I'll get your question, but I'm going to go over the issue generally. There are a couple different things. One, if you were arrested but not charged with a crime, so you were out somewhere, you got, say it was one of those cases where you were in your friend's car and they found drugs in the trunk and the cop just arrested everyone in the car, but the owner of the car is the one who is doing it, and they're the ones that actually get in trouble and charged with the crime, but you were in the car and they arrested you, but they did not charge you, the DA didn't charge you with the crime. You can apply for look at the form for the technical term, to seal and destroy your adult arrest record. So you file that petition out, you send it into the police department, and they'll probably deny it, but they might grant it. And then if they don't grant it, then you can send it to the court, and the court will handle it, and they'll hopefully seal that so that it doesn't show up on your record when you run your fingerprint.
So does that include things that they gave you some type of diversion for?
No.
Okay, so if you got diversion.
Diversion depends on the type, but some types of diversion you have to admit that you did something. Other types you don't admit to it, but it's kind of, wink and a nod, you kind of did it, and it hasn't actually been dismissed, but that's an agreement with the DA, and that would most likely have been, you would have been charged at that point if you do a diversionary type program. Usually, for adults. For juveniles, it's a little different. You don't get charged, and they'll do it sort of an informal diversion program for juveniles without actually charging you for that.
Because I've seen a couple of situations where, and I haven't seen it close up, people have shared, where they say, if you do this, then we'll drop the charge. So. Yeah,
and that's diversion, and
the charges are dropped by the DA.
Yeah, so that wouldn't qualify necessarily for this, because it was they actually charged it, and you could apply for it, but I think the DA would probably strenuously object to it. because they didn't dismiss it because you weren't guilty. Because of your record, they thought you deserved a break, and they gave you the diversion instead, right? What? The break is the diversion, instead of charging you and having to get convicted.
Then you don't have to go to jail.
So you don't have a conviction on your record. You still have the arrest, but you don't have the conviction. So the break is no conviction.
So when you go to apply for a job and the rest is still on your record, it doesn't still make any difference. If the employer
Depends on the employer, yeah, but...
Because we have so many students that are unable to work in our program at juvenile hall simply because they've been arrested. And juvenile hall will not take anybody who's been arrested. And so, and so if they won't take you as a volunteer, then we know they're not going to take them to be hired. And most of them are for minor things, like the drugs and stuff like that.
And I had a case in Yolo County where client was charged with statutory rape in the early mid-90s, something like that, and they went through a preliminary hearing, and then they dropped the charges after the preliminary hearing. And one of the things about this is you're supposed to file that in 2 years. You can do it if you've been charged when they dismiss it for other reasons. If they dismiss the charges for insufficient evidence, for example, you can do that petition and get it dismissed. And in this case, my client had an exemplary record since then, no new charges, not even a speeding ticket or anything. And he was going to the community college up there, doing, getting his drug and alcohol counseling certificate or something like that. He applied for a program to work with, I think, parolees in that field. And because it was a CDC-related program, they did the same thing. They said, oh, you got this arrest on your record, we can't take you. So we did that petition, and the judge let us do it, even though it was like over 10 years ago. And it was, you have good cause, it can be past the 2-year limit. So he let us do that, and then even though it had gone through prelim, which a preliminary hearing, the judge has to say, well, I think there's pretty good enough showing of fact that you probably did whatever it is the DA is charging you with, and he was held to answer. Despite that, the judge in that case granted the petition to seal and destroy his record. And the main thing I think with that was, it goes back to something I was talking to him about, is showing rehabilitation, or showing, because if we showed that he hadn't done anything for 10 plus years, and that he was working in the community to help other people, and he had some recommendations from the teachers saying he was doing great, and all of those kinds of things. And so that, I think, more than the technicalities of the law that he could or couldn't get the judge weighed what we call the equities in the law, weighed the good versus the bad of it, and said, I think it's good to grant him this so that we can do more good in the community. So in saying, it's not likely, obviously you need to talk to a lawyer who can look at your record and help you decide whether that's something you should or shouldn't file or might not proceed. Because, that one I told my client I didn't think he was going to grant it, but he did. So, if we hadn't filed it, he wouldn't have gotten it. So it's definitely a good idea to file it. Moving on to the next type, 1203.4 is a type of relief that you can get, and that's commonly called the expungement, but it's actually a dismissal of your case after the conviction. So you plead to misdemeanor or a felony, either one. Once you're off of probation, if you're granted probation, once you're off, you can apply if you have no violations of probation. you had any well, you can apply either way. If it's not a DUI or a DUI-related charge, the judge pretty much has to grant it if you didn't have any violations of probation. If you had any violations of probation, the judge can grant it, but it's at the judge's discretion. And if it's a DUI case, it's at the judge's discretion. So where, and I'll get to the question in a second, where that becomes an issue is, say you had a couple probation violations and you just got off probation and now you want to get your 1203.4. Most likely, the judge isn't going to grant that if you just got off probation and you had violations.